America just announced tariffs on 8 European countries: Germany, France, UK, Denmark, and 4 others, starting February 1st. 10%, going up to 25% by June. The reason? Greenland. An island of ice. Population 56,000. GDP smaller than a mid-sized city. And now NATO allies are threatening each other over it. What is going on? Here is what nobody is explaining properly. This isn't about Greenland. This is about supply insecurity and what happens when the system looks for shortcuts.
Europe holds strong market leverage. It has a decent platform, but the supplier lever, structurally weak. Look at the architecture before 2022. Roughly 40% of Europe's gas came from Russia. For rare earths, China is the biggest source, about 46%. But the real choke point isn't the ore, it's the components. For rare earth permanent magnets, Europe is 98% dependent on China. And here lies the fracture. Europe built an advanced economy on borrowed inputs. They rented their foundation from their rivals. Then, the mandate changed. Climate targets demanded EVs, batteries, solar, wind. These aren't just policies, they are minerals. The choice was simple: secure the supply or lose industrial competitiveness forever. So they reached for a tool. July 2021, the EU-Ukraine Strategic Partnership on Critical Raw Materials. Ukraine holds 5% of global mineral resources. Europe invested for access. But physics has a side effect. February 2022, Russia invades, and the supplier becomes a battlefield.
The West expected Russia to buckle. Sanctions would crush the economy. The war would be short. Here is the reality in one sentence. Sanctions pressure failed to become a monopoly because demand rerouted. India became a major buyer of Russian crude, roughly 1/3 of imports at the peak. China absorbed the volume too. Even Europe still bought energy, indirectly, through refined products. The isolation tool wasn't absolute. The war dragged. And this reveals the crack. War timelines don't match investment timelines. Politics doesn't wait. America votes every 4 years, and the costs continue to mount. So they used a new tool to lock the future upside. April 2025. The US signs a minerals deal with Ukraine, a joint investment fund, 50% of royalties from new licenses, preferential access. Now, this framework wasn't new. The logic existed before, but what was quietly understood became formally documented. The signature revealed the incentive. Strategic upside was always part of the calculation. But it still doesn't solve the timeline. The Ukraine route remains slow, expensive, and uncertain. Greenland holds the same hand. Rare earths, uranium, zinc, deep oil potential. But here, there is no war, no battlefield. Denmark is NATO. This is internal leverage, not foreign conflict. Then comes the pivot. January 17, 2026. Tariffs are announced. 10% on 8 European countries, ramping to 25% by June if no deal is reached. The message was brutal in its clarity. Payable until a deal is reached for the complete and total purchase of Greenland. This is platform power, using tariffs as leverage, aimed directly at supplier assets. Why do this? Because the Ukraine route is too slow. The incentive shifted. They needed to find alternative supply faster, so they turned the weapon on their allies. But there is a side effect. Owning the ground doesn't mean owning the supply chain. And that reveals the next crack: the pipeline, the processing, the refining. It is still controlled somewhere else. This is the central pivot of the whole story. China doesn't just mine rare earths, it controls the bottleneck.
processing. Roughly 90% of global rare earth processing sits in China. Mining share is 60 to 70%, but processing is the monopoly. You can own every mine on the planet, but if you can't process, you can't use. This is the crack. Extraction secured, but processing controlled elsewhere. So the incentive shifted. Build Western processing capacity. They used every tool, subsidies, domestic hubs, friend-shoring. But the side effect? Higher costs, slower rollout, inflation persistence, and fragmentation. This is why Greenland isn't the solution. It is just one piece of a fractured pipeline. Ukraine fails due to battlefield risk. Greenland is the shortcut, but the pipeline is controlled by a third party. Therefore, the second-order conflict continues, and every factory pays the volatility tax. So, here is what this means for every business on the planet. 1. Cost volatility. Input prices swing wildly. Commodities, freight, insurance, financing. 2. Permissioned inputs. You need licenses, sanctions clearance, export approvals, just to buy materials. 3. The collapse of the planning horizon. Nobody can budget 5 years out when the rules change every quarter. This isn't just one crisis. This is a regime change. Global production becomes more expensive and less predictable. CapEx decisions delay. Inventory goes up. Margins get squeezed. That is the spine of the new world. Now let's zoom out to why this matters geopolitically. Think of it as a triangle of gravity. 1. Russia, energy supply. 2. China, processing and manufacturing. 3. India, the market, 1.4 billion consumers. Separately, each is manageable. Together, they create an alternative gravity to Western systems. Russia proved something important. The isolation tool is no longer absolute. Now, be clear, this isn't Russia is thriving, but Russia calculated the game better than expected. They tested their capabilities under maximum pressure and found they could route around it. That changes the math for everyone. America's incentive is to break this triangle. If India aligns west, the gravity weakens. The tool? Tariff pressure, compliance demands. Choose us or pay. But here is the problem. Demand is the final court. You don't pressure the world's largest consumer market into compliance. You compete for it. That is the miscalculation. Let's be precise about India. 1.4 billion people, median age 28. Over 60% are under 35. By 2030, over 1 billion people in the workforce. This isn't just population, this is aspirational demand. Young people who want phones, cars, homes, education, healthcare. Consumer spending is projected at $4.3 trillion by 2030. Now, India isn't powerful in the traditional sense. It imports most of its energy. The rupee isn't global. Military projection is regional. But India has the one thing every supplier needs: customers. The pressure campaign says, stop buying Russian oil, realign sourcing, comply or face tariffs. India's response, we're running a margin business, not financing anyone's war. Europe is watching this carefully. If America keeps pushing India, Europe sees an opening. Trade deals, tech partnerships, market access. Europe needs India's market, and India needs partners who aren't dictating terms. India isn't passive. It is building 3 capability pillars. Pillar 1, energy optionality. India buys from Russia, Saudi, UAE, Iraq, whoever offers value. The mechanism isn't loyalty, it's options, diversified sourcing, strategic reserves, a buffer against shocks. Pillar 2, middle chain manufacturing. China dominates processing. India's play is simple. If you can't mine, at least process. Build domestic refinery.
become a value addition node in the global supply chain. Pillar 3, regional security. India is quietly building its protector lever in South Asia. Not global yet, but the regional influence is expanding. Defense capability is growing. The strategy isn't to pick a side. The strategy is to build enough leverage that choosing becomes optional. This takes time, it takes capital, it means absorbing pressure in the short term. But India learned from watching the last 3 years. The entities that survive are the ones with options. So here is the causal chain. Supplier insecurity leads Europe to bet on Ukraine. The war breaks the timeline. This forces shortcut logic. Enter the Greenland play. But extraction isn't enough. We hit the pipeline choke. China controls the processing. Building alternatives is expensive. And the result? A permanent volatility tax. Meanwhile, the triangle of gravity, Russia, China, India, creates alternative leverage. America tries to break it by pressuring India. But you don't pressure markets, you compete for them. Europe sees the opening, and India is building options. But here is the dangerous part. Building a new supply chain takes a decade. But the next crisis? It isn't waiting for 2030. While everyone is fighting over the map, they're forgetting to watch the clock, and the time is almost up. If you want to understand the mechanism before the market feels the pain, subscribe. We don't just read the news, we map the flow.